All right, let's kick this off with a pretty sobering fact. We all have this image of hackers trying to break down the front door of a company, right? Like through the main network. But the reality? That's not the primary way they're getting in anymore. Nope. They're waltzing right in through the web applications we all use every single day.
So, if your apps are basically the new, unguarded front door, you're going to need a much smarter lock. And that's exactly what brings us to our topic today, the Web Application Firewall, or as you'll hear it called, a WAF. We're going to break down what it is, how it's supposed to work, and, this is the crucial part, where this digital security guard can totally drop the ball.
So here's our plan. First, we'll look at why web apps are such a big target. Then, we'll get into what a WAF actually is. After that, we'll see how it works under the hood. And finally, we'll cover the 6 huge risks you need to know about.
All right, let's dive into part 1. To really get why WAFs even exist, we've got to understand the problem they're trying to solve. I mean, why is this such a big deal?
And look, this isn't just some hypothetical threat. You've got the PCI Security Standards Council, and these are the folks who make the rules for protecting your credit card info, and they're shouting this from the rooftops. Their forensic data is crystal clear. Attackers are consistently getting in through web applications, especially with classic attacks like SQL injection. So that is the problem we're up against. Okay, so we've established the why. Now let's introduce the what. The tool built specifically to deal with this, the Web Application Firewall.
So what is a WAF, really? Well, think of it like a highly specialized filter, or maybe a bouncer at a club. It stands right in front of your web app. It's what's called a reverse proxy, which is just a fancy way of saying that to everyone on the internet, the WAF looks like your application. It intercepts everything, every single HTTP request, and inspects it before it's allowed anywhere near the actual server.
Okay, this is where a lot of people get confused. You might be thinking, hang on, I've already got a firewall. And yeah, you probably do, but that's a network firewall. Think of that as the big fence around your entire property. It checks who's coming and going based on their address, their IP address and port. It's kind of basic. A WAF, on the other hand, is the specialist security guard standing right at the door of the most important building. This guard doesn't just check your ID, they're going to ask you to open your bag and they're going to inspect everything inside it. That's layer 7, the actual content of the traffic.
So how exactly does this specialist security guard do its job? Let's pop the hood and take a look at the mechanics.
So, like we said, it's a reverse proxy, sitting right at the edge. It lives at layer 7 of the network model. That's the application layer. This is super important because that's where the actual data, the content of your conversation with the web app, exists. The WAF grabs all that traffic, both coming in and going out, and analyzes it for anything malicious before it ever gets a chance to hit the real web server.
And this inspection process is pretty slick. It's not just a simple scan. A request comes in and the WAF does a few things. But the really clever part is something called normalization. You see, attackers love to disguise their attacks using weird encoding to make them look like harmless gibberish. Normalization is the WAF's process of decoding all of that trickery to see the request for what it really is. Only after it's been cleaned up and decoded does the WAF check it against its security rules.
So how does it know what's bad and what's good? Well, WAFs usually work on one of 2 basic models. The first is a negative security model, which is basically a blacklist. It has a big book of known bad things, attack signatures, malicious patterns, and if it sees something on that list, it's blocked. The other way is the positive security model, a whitelist. This is way stricter. It's like an exclusive guest list for a party. If the traffic pattern isn't on the approved list, it's not getting in, period.
Okay, to make this less abstract, let's look at a real example of what a WAF is trying to catch. This little string of code might look weird, but it's a classic, textbook SQL injection attack. An attacker could pop this into a simple search bar. Now, a poorly secured database doesn't just see the word Apple. It sees a command that says, find Apple, or check if 1 equals 1. Well, guess what? 1 always equals 1. That true statement can trick the database into dumping all its data. Usernames, passwords, you name it. This is exactly the kind of thing a WAF is built to spot and shut down.
So a WAF sounds pretty amazing, right? Like the perfect defense. But, and this is a huge but, this is where things get tricky. A WAF is absolutely not a set-it-and-forget-it solution. If you don't manage it right, that shiny shield can be about as useless as Swiss cheese. So let's talk about the 6 critical risks that can turn your WAF into just an expensive box with blinking lights.
And this is for anyone out there doing security assessments or audits. The question isn't just, do you have a WAF? The real question is
Is your WAF avoiding these 6 critical failure modes?
All right, risks 1 and 2. First, incomplete coverage. This sounds so basic, but you would be shocked how often it happens. A company will protect their main website on the standard port, but completely forget about other apps or even other open ports on that same server. If it's not explicitly covered by the WAF's rules, it's wide open. Then there's risk number 2, and this one is a huge landmine: unmanaged sensitive data. See, to inspect encrypted HTTPS traffic, the WAF has to decrypt it first. That means for a brief moment, your passwords, your login tokens, all that good stuff is sitting there in plain text inside the WAF. If the WAF isn't set up to properly mask or scrub that data, it just becomes a new shiny target for attackers.
Moving on to risks 3 and 4. Number 3 is what I like to call the silent failure, leaving the WAF in learning mode forever. When you first install a WAF, you put it in this mode so it can learn what normal traffic looks like. But in this mode, it doesn't block anything, it just watches and takes notes. The problem is, a lot of teams never take that next step to put it in block mode. So you have this expensive device that sees every attack, logs it, and then politely waves it on through. And number 4 is improper log monitoring. A WAF can scream, "I'm being attacked," all day long, but if those alerts just go into a digital black hole and aren't piped into a central security monitoring system, a SIM, then nobody is going to hear them. It's like a fire alarm with no bell.
Okay, last 2. Risk number 5 is an operational one: no high availability. Your WAF is sitting in front of everything, right? So what happens if that one box fails? Well, if you don't have a backup ready to take over instantly, often the system is designed to just fail open, meaning all traffic bypasses it and your apps are completely exposed. And finally, number 6, and this might be the most important one: the lack of skilled people. A WAF is not a toaster. You can't just plug it in. It needs a smart, experienced administrator to constantly tune the rules, investigate alerts, and weed out false positives. That kind of talent is really hard to find, and without it, even the most advanced WAF is basically useless.
And here is a perfect technical example of why that human expertise is so critical. This is a WAF bypass. An attacker takes their malicious command and URL encodes it twice. Now, a basic or poorly configured WAF might see this, decode it once, look at the result and think, well, that's just a bunch of gibberish, and let it through. But here's the kicker. The web server behind the WAF sees that gibberish and decodes it a second time, revealing the real attack payload. It's a brilliant trick that preys on lazy configuration.
And that really brings us to the final critical question you have to ask yourself. It's not enough to check a box and say, yep, we have a WAF. You have to be sure it's actually configured correctly, that it's being monitored, and that it's constantly being tuned by someone who knows what they're doing. So I'll leave you with this thought. Take a good, hard look at your own setup and ask, is your WAF a real shield or is it just expensive security theater?